What if we told you that Ford's billion-dollar investment plans in Canada could be on the verge of collapse? Not because of market failure, but because of a political trade war brewing between the US and its closest ally as tariffs reach historic highs under Trump's aggressive new import policies. Ford is caught in the middle of a cross-border economic storm. The automaker, which just reported a solid $1.3 billion in quarterly profits, is now bracing for a potential $1.5 billion blow from these very tariffs, enough to derail key projects, freeze supply chains, and send shockwaves through Canadian plants. But that's not all. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has entered the fray, threatening to cut off electricity exports to U.S. states like Michigan in retaliation. Power Ford's U.S. factories critically depend on. This tit-for-tat escalation isn't just rhetoric. It's a real risk to jobs, vehicle prices, and the future of EV production in both countries. Meanwhile, Ford's Oakville and Windsor facilities, recently boosted with new funding for electric vehicle development and assembly, now find themselves at the heart of a geopolitical tug-of-war. Will Ford be forced to abandon its North American EV strategy? Will American consumers end up paying the price for Washington's trade brinkmanship? And could this be the tipping point that shifts auto manufacturing away from Canada altogether, reshaping the industry for years to come? Because behind the scenes, Ford executives are scrambling to adapt, weighing whether to reroute parts production from Mexico and Canada entirely, or absorb the skyrocketing costs and pass them on to consumers. The stakes couldn't be higher. At the same time, suppliers across Ontario and Quebec are already feeling the ripple effects, with some reporting halted orders and delayed shipments from Ford's U.S. plants. Even Ford's ambitious plan to launch its new EV lineup, heavily reliant on North American battery sourcing, is in jeopardy. And as Washington and Ottawa dig in their heels, uncertainty hangs over multi-billion-dollar ventures like Ford's proposed Quebec battery plant, a key part of its strategy to compete with Tesla and BYD. Adding fuel to the fire, industry insiders warn that this escalating trade tension could create a vacuum, one that global competitors like Hyundai, Volkswagen, and even Chinese automakers are eager to fill. They've been watching the US-Canada standoff closely, and their moves in the coming months could upend everything. So how did a company that once stood as a symbol of cross-border industrial cooperation get pulled into this economic knife fight? And what's next for the workers, factories, and communities that depend on it as political leaders exchange threats and tariffs tighten their grip? Ford's future in Canada hangs in the balance, not because of lack of innovation or demand, but because of a volatile policy battlefield where diplomacy has been replaced by brinkmanship. In Windsor, the city long known as the engine of Canadian auto manufacturing, union leaders are already warning of possible layoffs, while small businesses that rely on factory workers for their livelihoods brace for a downturn. Meanwhile, Ford's U.S. operations aren't immune either. Michigan's assembly lines, deeply connected to parts flowing in from Ontario, face production slowdowns that could lead to bottlenecks and delivery delays across the country. Consumers may soon notice not just higher prices, but fewer choices on dealer lots. And with electric vehicles being a cornerstone of Ford's future, any disruption in battery supply from its planned Canadian facilities could hand a decisive advantage to rival automakers who have invested more heavily in domestic or Asian battery ecosystems. What started as a strategic move to build a North American EV hub is now mired in regulatory risk and political crossfire. And as Ford executives weigh emergency plans, including possibly shifting some operations to friendlier trade zones or even Europe, the question becomes, how much longer can Ford afford to wait before making a drastic move that could permanently alter its North American footprint? Already, internal reports suggest contingency plans are being drafted, ones that could see billions in Canadian investments frozen or redirected should the tariff environment worsen. And this isn't just about Ford. General Motors, Stellantis, and even Toyota are watching closely, knowing that whatever precedent is set here could cascade across the entire industry. For Ford, a company that has publicly championed its Canadian partnerships and poured resources into local innovation hubs, walking away wouldn't just be a financial decision. It would be a symbolic rupture in one of the most integrated manufacturing relationships on the continent. Yet as Trump doubles down on his America First tariff doctrine and Doug Ford fires back with energy export threats, the pressure mounts. Negotiations remain stalled, and behind closed doors, lobbyists, trade advisors, and auto execs are locked in crisis meetings trying to engineer a path forward. But with each passing week of inaction, the window narrows. Investors are growing anxious. Workers are demanding answers. And Ford's board is facing a chilling reality. Adapt quickly or risk losing their competitive edge in the very market they helped build. So now the auto world is asking, will Ford choose to fight for its position in a fractured North American trade landscape, or retreat to markets where stability and government incentives offer safer ground? The coming weeks could decide the fate of decades-long infrastructure, from the assembly lines in Oakville to the advanced battery research labs in Quebec. Political rhetoric has already begun shaping consumer sentiment. Patriotic calls to buy American are clashing with real-world dependencies that no automaker can ignore. Even the dealers are caught in limbo, with many reporting growing confusion among buyers as pricing volatility and delayed deliveries disrupt traditional sales cycles. As Ford tries to reassure stakeholders, its executives are quietly preparing for scenarios that include layoffs, cross-border tax adjustments, and realignment of production priorities. And while they do, China's EV juggernauts, less exposed to this tariff tug-of-war, are moving fast, seizing the opportunity to enter a weakened North American market with cheaper, untaxed alternatives. In essence, Ford's future in Canada is no longer just about supply chains or production lines. It's about whether the automaker can navigate a political minefield where every move is high stakes and every delay could mean the loss of a market lead it spent decades building. The next corporate earnings call, the next government announcement, the next tariff vote, each one could be the moment that tips the balance, and with every passing day, that tipping point inches closer. Inside Ford's headquarters, sources say the mood is tense, with executives juggling crisis simulations and lobbying campaigns while watching their stock price twitch with every new headline from Washington or Ottawa. The automaker is urgently seeking assurances. Will there be exemptions for auto parts? Can Canada and the US salvage a bilateral auto pact outside of broader trade negotiations? But answers are scarce, and time is running short. Meanwhile, behind factory walls in both countries, workers are starting to realize that this isn't just political theater. This is about their paychecks, their communities, and their futures. In towns where Ford plants are the economic lifeblood, mayors and union leaders are calling emergency meetings, trying to prepare for the potential shockwave of cancelled shifts and shuttered production. And while Ford is still holding the line publicly, talking about its long-term commitment to Canada and its belief in a continental manufacturing base, the reality is clear. Without immediate policy relief or a breakthrough in talks, the company may be forced to act swiftly and decisively. What happens next could reshape not just Ford's presence in Canada, but the very structure of the North American auto alliance that has powered two nations for generations. And if that alliance fractures, it won't just be Ford that pays the price. It'll be an entire ecosystem of small suppliers, logistics firms, tech startups, and blue-collar families who have built their lives around this deeply interwoven auto economy. Already, warning signs are flashing across the industry. Parts shipments that once flowed seamlessly across the Ambassador Bridge now face heightened inspections and uncertainty. Just-in-time manufacturing, once a cornerstone of Ford's efficiency, is being disrupted by political timelines and customs bottlenecks. Even innovation itself is slowing, as R&D budgets tighten under the looming shadow of trade instability. Canadian universities partnered with Ford on EV battery research are beginning to wonder whether their breakthroughs will ever make it to production, or if they'll be shelved indefinitely due to geopolitical fallout. In the background, competitors are circling. Asian automakers with vertically integrated supply chains and fewer cross-border entanglements are using this moment of vulnerability to expand their footprint. Investors, too, are diversifying away from US-Canada auto stocks, fearing long-term volatility. And as public pressure mounts on both sides of the border, politicians must now weigh economic stability against nationalist posturing. All while, the clock ticks down on decisions that could either restore confidence or trigger irreversible damage.